Hello there. Today I'm going to talk about Pulsewidth's thermal relaxation time and cooking times as related to photothermal reactions in the skin. This is after irradiating some tissues with lasers or IPLs. So when we do this, the targets that we're hopefully trying to break down or alter, the temperature of those targets should increase as they absorb some of the light energy. Now, this temperature increase usually stops at the end of the pulse width. The pulse width is essentially the delivery time of the energy. That's what it basically means. After that, then the temperature will cool down in some sort of fashion, typically like this. And this cooling curve, the shape of it and the extent of it will depend on how much energy is absorbed and on the physical size of the target. So we tend to find that small targets will cool down much faster than big thick targets, and that can relate to either hair or blood vessels or similar. Okay, so we've got this temperature curve. The maximum temperature we call the peak temperature, and at some point that temperature will have dropped to about 50% of the peak value, and the time it takes to drop from the peak to 50% is what we call the thermal relaxation time. This is just a fairly arbitrary definition. You could define it in other ways if you liked, but this is the standard definition we use for photothermal treatments in the skin. So the two times to consider here are the pulse width, which is how long it takes to deliver the light energy, and then the relaxation time, which is the time taken to drop for the temperature to drop from its maximum to 50% of that value. Right, okay, now we want to look at a third temperature here, and this is the denaturation threshold temperature. So this is the temperature at which the cells or the tissues start to denature. Now, the actual temperature depends on a number of factors which I won't get into here, but you're typically looking at usually somewhere between about 55 and 60 degrees Celsius or thereabouts. So you can see here that this is a relatively low temperature on this particular chart. If you imagine the peak could be at, I don't know, 80 or 90 or something like that, maybe even 100 degrees, then the denaturation threshold temperature is relatively low. But as long as the temperature is above that threshold, then the cells will start to break down through the denaturation process. And that process is basically just the proteins unraveling. So what we find then is that there's a zone, what I call the denaturation zone, where the temperature is sufficiently high to cause the cells to break down. And that zone occupies part of the pulse width, as you can see here, and a significant chunk of the cooling time after the pulse is finished. So this is the third important time in this sequence. This is the denaturation time, and it's a time over which the tissues in the cells will actually cook or denature. Now, the rate of denaturation actually is exponential. Now, this is actually very important. We know this from the Arrhenius equation, which I've discussed previously. So what it tells us is that as the temperature increases linearly, then the rate of denaturation increases exponentially, much faster than the linear increase in temperature. And what that means then is that if you have a relatively low temperature, you're going to have a commensurately slow denaturation, so it'll take quite a long time for all the cells to break down properly. If you have a higher temperature, then those cells will denaturate faster, and therefore less time is required to destroy them. And an even higher temperature will cause a much faster denaturation process, which means you don't need much time at all to kill those cells. So quite simply, the higher the temperature, the faster the denaturation process takes place, and therefore the quicker and easier it is to kill those cells and tissues. But the timing here of the denaturation is not directly related to the pulse width. As you can see, for these three different levels I've got here, the timing, the denaturation time, are quite different, but none of them are directly related to the pulse width or the relaxation time. So while there's no direct link between the denaturation times and the pulse width and relaxation time, there is obviously a link, because longer pulse widths mean you have a longer initial phase to the end of the pulse, and the size of the object will determine the thermal relaxation times. And if it's a big thick object, then there'll be more time for denaturation to occur. So it's quite tricky trying to relate all these things together. There's no obvious relation there at all. It really depends on the size of the objects and how much energy, or in other words, how hot they become. So we've got three important times to consider: the pulse width, which is the time it takes to deliver the light energy; the relaxation time, which is just a cooling time, and it depends a lot on the physical size of the target; the denaturation time, which is the cooking time, and that depends on the chemistry of the target. So there's no direct correlation between the denaturation time and the relaxation time or the pulse width. There are three quite different but important times. Higher temperatures will denate the cells faster than lower temperatures, and therefore higher fluences are more efficient than using longer pulses. I sometimes see people asking, I've got big thick hairs here, should I use longer pulses? And my answer is always, well, you could do that, but you're actually better off using a higher fluence, which will generate higher temperatures, and they will cook much faster in those higher temperatures compared to using a long pulse, which can result in lower temperatures, which then needs a commensurately longer time to denature. So higher fluences are always a more efficient way of destroying target tissues compared with long pulses. Hope you enjoyed this little talk. Pulse widths and relaxation times and cooking times is a bit confusing. I see a lot of comments online, and clearly people they don't quite understand this, and it does cause a bit of an issue out there. You can find more of my stuff either on my blog at mikemurphyblog.com, or we have now a podcast, Lasers and Skin. The QR code will take you to the Apple podcast outlet, but we're also on Spotify and Amazon and other podcasting places. I hope you enjoyed this, and look forward to talking to you in the future.